Good evening. Today, me and Brigadier Bhatia will be discussing the chapter 2 of the evolution of operation art from Napoleon to the present era. In this chapter, we will be discussing the Prussian German operational art. It starts from 1740 to 1943. It's a longish chapter which has got a lot of things. Lot of things are discussed in that. The matrix, the Persian army, the Blitz, Barry Helen, and a conclusion where the Blitzkrieg was going down. So we will be discussing all those things one by one. In the introduction, we will be discussing the philosophical approach on the operational art. Uh, in this, Brigadier Bhatia will give you in detail what are the three concepts of operational art: the scientific approach, managerial approach, and the artistic approach. Over to you, Brigadier Bhatia.
Thank you very much, Gotra. It's a pleasure talking to you. In fact, we've introduced this new format so that our discourse is more on discussion and slightly informal way. The way the last episode we got the response, it seems that our audience has liked it. So, as discussed, as told by Gotra, I will begin today's episode with philosophical approaches to operational art. In the previous episode, we explained that operational art is a connect between strategy and tactical action. It is operational art who connects the how of tactics with the why of strategy. Since Napoleon times, science has played an important part in how weapons are constantly improving the reach and devastation on the battleground. Optimum utilization of this enhanced reach is changing the operational art also. Don't forget that it was the operational art because of which superpowers like superpowers like the USSR and the US have lost to ragtag armies in Afghanistan and earlier in Vietnam. Experts believe that the superpower theoretical concepts were brilliant, but they could not practice a high quality operational art to convert this into tactics on ground. So the superpowers lost because of poor tactics, which was result of poor operational art. Their strategy was wonderful, their weapons were excellent. So as Brigadier Gotra had mentioned, there are three approaches to operational art. It is the scientific approach of the Soviet Union, the managerial method of United States, and intuitive perspective of Prussia and Germany. The Soviet Union views war as an exact science rooted in Marxist-Leninist ideology. The communist theory regards that every aspect of life is governed by a set of principles which follow a system which is systematic. They believe that operational success could be achieved through meticulous planning, extensive training, and application of objective principles. The Soviet treated war as something that can be calculated, and it has definite deductions from a factor, and it cannot be vague. They feel that you must operate in depth. Now, keep in mind that Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union, was a resource-rich country. Even today, the richest nation of the world is Russia. They are full of natural resources. They do not have problem of manpower because it's a communist country. So they can ask for manpower by order. Every Russian citizen is duty bound to serve in their army. So they have no problem as far as resources is concerned. And they also emphasize on logistics. They are good in logistics and they can move things from one location to another. And they do not have to depend on imports of anything, unlike other countries where the natural resources are limited. Now let's look at the American way of waging the war. Americans behave like manager, and they say that like in business, war can be managed in the way a business house is managed, for which you need resource optimization. Now, because it was an industrial power and it has pragmatic ethos, so that's why in American way of waging war, emphasis is on organization. They feel that combat itself is uncertain, but it can be managed. And what needs to be managed is the uncertainty of war. And now we come to the Prussian German intuitive approach. First of all, let's know what is Prussian. Prussian is the modern day northern Germany, Poland, and part of Russia, that is Kaliningrad. Later, it became the German military tradition. The way Germany fought in World War One and World War Two was borrowed from the ideas from this Prussian culture. They feel that warfare is an art. They feel that it cannot be taught. Any any art is more of an intuitive. It's a sort of concept which automatically comes to a person. If a person is a poet, he is a poet. Nobody can teach another person to become a poet. Similarly, they feel that operational excellence is either there or it is not there in a commander. If this art of waging war exists in an individual, he deserves to go higher in life because he can convert the strategy of that nation into tactics utilizing his intuitive ability, which is natural to him. And intuitive ability, second most important aspect of intuitive ability to come to the fore is situational awareness. So, if you actually see German campaigns, they believe very strongly that they should be absolutely aware of what is happening around in the battlefield, and based on these updates, they should take a decision which is more intuitive. So, there are historical reasons for why Germany has decided to go with this form of art. Germany, or erstwhile Prussia, was surrounded by more powerful neighbors, and this land, unlike the Soviets and to some extent Americans, lacked sufficient resources for prolonged wars. So therefore, it became important for their military that they should deliver decisive victories in shortest possible campaigns. Frederick, about which I'm sure Brother Gotra will talk about, his operational philosophy revolved around swift, concentrated strikes. His army's high readiness and aggressive tactics was, you could see that in all the wars that he has waged. Another very important aspect of this intuitive approach, is that unlike rigid Soviet planning or managerial logistics of the US, German operationalized art, they gave flexibility to their commanders. their leaders expanded on the laid down ethos. They introduced the concept of decentralization, and their units were ready to exploit any fleeting opportunity that was coming in their way. So, if we conclude the philosophical aspects of the three approaches that I have described, you see two extremes. If we compare practicability and adaptability, the US leaned heavily on predictability, relying on exact principles for success. Where Soviet Union, they focused on predictable administration and logistic efficiency. And the Prussia or the German way of looking at is that they emphasized on intuition and adaptability in uncertain scenarios. Because of the size of the country, the US favored deep synchronized attack designed to crush enemy. The Soviet Union prioritized strategic objectives over the immediate tactical outcomes because they had plenty of depth to do so. Whereas the German way is that tactical success is more important than the strategic goals. They feel that small little tactical successes will lead ultimately to strategic goals. And orientation, Soviets always believed that they go in for prolonged war. Look at what they're doing in Russia-Ukraine war. They are ready to fight a prolonged war, and in the end, they want total annihilation of their enemy. Prussians wanted to incapacitate enemies in a swift, decisive battle, whereas the Americans are going for balanced extremes, aligning outcomes, broader political logistic considerations. So this has been their approach in the war. So, in fact, if you look at, again, I will give you example of what Vietnam and Afghanistan and in Iraq, they kept on that political and logistic considerations were so important that they didn't want to prolong it so long, but they've not been able to bring an end to the war. So this, in brief, is what the philosophical comparison of the three approaches. Now I will request Brigadier Gotra to take on after this, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Brigadier Bhatia. Having discussed the philosophical approaches and the conceptual approaches, which is given in the introduction of the chapter, now we move on to how the operational art developed in Prussia.
Okay.
Now, it all started with Frederick the Great. Bhatia has already told you, because of the geographical realities and the lack of natural resources, the country had a particular way of fighting. That is to have a swift warfare and forward loaded. That is what the Frederick the Great did. He forward loaded the military because there was no strategic depth, and they wanted to have swift and decisive wars. So Frederick emphasized on time and resource conservation, and shaped the warfare by having decisive battles, which can be seen in the Mollwitz in 1741 and also in Sur warfare in 1745, where they sought to minimize the unpredictability. That was the thing. Then the integrated war economy. They integrated the Prussian state economy, became aligned with the military needs, with the annual maneuvers simulating large scale battles to prepare officers for high stress situation. So the preparation was all through. So overall, the Fredericks reliance on the tactical brilliance often bypassed the operational art. Of course, it laid the foundation of the operational art, which was later taken up by the Mole case. But till the time that 7 Years' War happened, that is in 1756 to 1763, the whatever brilliance was there, its limitations were exposed, leaving Prussia devastated despite eventual survival. So now, based on this, we will move to what happened in the Napoleonic era. In the Napoleonic era, because the wars highlighted the need of operational thinking. It was done by the Napoleon. However, the Prussian army clung to the tactical opportunism, which was happening earlier, and they suffered catastrophic defeat, such as Jena, Austerlitz, post, but post reforms included collision tactics, that is, focus on evading the Napoleon and leveraging alliances, and mass mobilization. So Persia adopted during the War of Liberation, though it exposed weaknesses in terms of the combined arm coordination. So overall, till about 1815, the Persian army displayed strong fighting spirit but lacked the operational coherence to act independently in a grand scale. So coherence was lacking at this time. Operational art as a distinctive concept emerged under Helmut von Moltke, the Elder. He is called the Elder in mid 19th century. His key contributions were railroad and logistics. Moltke utilized railways for rapid troop deployment, enabling synchronized multi-army movements, which can be seen in the Austro-Prussian War in 1866 and the Franco-Prussian War in 1870 to 1871. Then he decentralized the command. Moltke emphasized that on mission tactics, which they called Auftragstaktik, a difficult name to pronounce, but I am segregating it because it will be easier to remember. Auftragstaktik, because you have to write it there, the spellings. So, mission tactics allowing subordinates to exercise initiatives within a broad strategic framework. So, there was a leeway given to the commanders within the broad strategic framework. Then was this synergizing the campaigns. Moltke integrated strategic objectives with operational actions, culminating in decisive battles like Königrad's in 1866 and Sedan in 1870. Moltke's approach was formalized in the Instruction for Higher Troops Commanders, which they wrote in 1869. Thus, it stressed the destruction of enemy forces through coordinated movers. So here the operational art started coming in. Then is the Schiffin's plan and the early 20th century challenges. Alfred von Schlieffen, Moltke's successor, he envisioned a total battle integrated strategy, integrating the strategy, the operation, and the tactics. His plan was a massive envelopment through Belgium, which is called the Schlieffen plan. This was designated to quickly incapacitate France. However, it suffered from problems like the operational rigidities, which you will later see in the Soviet also. So, this was the plan depended on perfect execution. Now, that is a problem. Perfect, because there are contingencies which are going to happen, and you have to adapt to those contingencies. So, this was a critical flaw which was seen during World War One. Then was the technological constraints. So advancements in firepower and fortification hindered the sweeping maneuvers envisioned by Schiffin. Now, with the trench warfare coming in, what they wanted was a very, very sweeping action, but it halted them, and the firepowers also had no. So the failure to sustain momentum in 1914 marked the collapse of the operational art. As stalemated, this was stalemated by the trench warfare, dominated which dominated in the Western Front. Now the interwar period, that is between the World War One and World War Two, it saw the uh, post World War One constraints under the Treaty of Versailles. Now, what happened in Treaty of Versailles was they all got together and Germany or Prussia had to pay a very heavy penalty. Also, it was restricted to have 1 lakh force of 1 lakh only, and then it was also restricted. It was not allowed to have tanks and air force. So under those constraints, uh, Rishwar is the regime which was there from 1914 to 1933. Uh, the Rishwar became innovative in these limited resources. And at that time, Hans von Seekt, Seekt is the right pronunciation, spearheaded the reforms to prepare for fighting outnumbered. So what he did was, first he did the mechanization and mobility. So in that he experimented with the motorized units and combined arms tactics, laid the groundwork for the Panzer divisions, which came later on. And then they came out with a doctrinal development. In this, during the war games and theoretical exercise, they emphasized on mobility, initiative, and the operational flexibility. Again, in this period, the decisive offensives were this thing. So, Rishwar, the official name for the German armed forces during the Republic. Weimar Republic was the thing, and the first year of the third reach is the Nazi period.
Nazi period. Yeah.
Nazi period, because these terms keep coming in this chapter. So if you're not clear about it, then it's a problem. So they embrace the principle of Begung Krieg. Begung Krieg is war of movement, and preparing for short intensity wars. So by about 1930, they had laid the foundation that would enable them to field a mechanized force capable of executing operational campaign by about 1930. Then came the Blitzkrieg and the World War II. Generally, people misunderstood Blitzkrieg as a doctrine. So it was a manifestation of the German operational art. Manifestation of the operational art. Its key features were rapid envelopment. So they used the combined arms enabled breakthroughs and deep penetration, as demonstrated in Poland in 1939 and France 1940. Then the flexibility and initiative. German commanders adapted quickly to the battlefield developments, turning tactical opportunities into operational advantages, which was a mistake earlier. Now they started capitalizing on that. Then the close air support. The German Air Force, Luftwaffe, which they say, integrated with the ground forces. So it enhanced the speed and the shock effect of the offensives. It was a major flip. However, there was a problem. This also suffered from certain limitations. First was in the Battle of Barbarossa, 1941, the invasion of Soviet Union. This overstretched the logistics of the Germans and exposed the strategic incoherence of the advancing in multiple directions. So, in a prolonged operation, this coherence gave way. Then was the Stalingrad in 1942. Though operational success devolved into the tactical stalemates due to the overextension and the resource constraint. Again, overextension, prolonged period, they were not prepared for it. So they had a problem with that. So now we move to the next part, that is the decline of the operation art. By 1943, Germany's ability to conduct operational campaign was crippled. The resource shortages was one of the problem. The extension of the Panzer division diluted their effectiveness,
Hmm.
while logistical failures hampered mobility. Then was the strategic overreach. Hitler's interference and shifting objectives undermined the coherent operational art planning. Then was the problem of Allied countermeasures. As discussed earlier, superior Allied logistics and coordination combined with innovations like the massive air power neutralized the German advantages in the mobility. So, with the massive air power, they were able to break down the mobility of Germans. Earlier, it was a trench warfare. Now, the air power came in, so they had a problem. So, in the final stage, Germans relied on the desperate defensive maneuvers, unable to regain the operational momentum of the earlier years. So, what was there in the earlier years from 40, 39, 40, it fitted away. So, overall, in the conclusion, we can say the legacy of the Prussian German operational art in this, the evolution of the German operational art reflects a continuous adaptation to the technological, geopolitical, and the strategic challenges. While its principles enabled remarkable victories, they were often undermined by the rigid hierarchies, over reliance on initiative without coordination, and an inability to transition from the tactical brilliance to the sustained strategy. Operational art remains a critical study for the modern militaries, serving as a cautionary tale both to the potential and its pitfalls.
Uh, Thank you, Gotra. It was a brilliant compilation of facts. As you said, our students, while reading this chapter, will find that this chapter is quite long and it is a very deep reading is required, but you have made it very simple. So, if I have understood the way you have explained, it is the ph- core philosophy has remained that it is at tactical level which when combined together is the one which is going to lead to the strategic brilliance of the German. But because it lacked resources and sufficient depth, that is the reason that in World War One as well as in World War Two, ultimately they lost out for these two reasons. Though initially on both occasions, if you recall, they made brilliant successes with minimum effort. So it was the mobility, the innovative out of box thinking of the German that despite being at disadvantage because of the swiftness and the flexibility which their commanders exhibited, that they were able to convert the strategy into tactical victories. uh, I would like to I'm asking you a question now about India Pakistan 1971 war. If we talk about Bangladesh, do you have some quick takes on how India exhibited operational art during 1979, especially on the eastern, that is present day Bangladesh front? Do you think it was a brilliance of few of our generals which resulted in outright victory for Indian Army in 1971?
Exactly. This is a brilliant maneuver in which the Pakistanis were outmaneuvered by the by the Indian forces. The four corps coming from that side, they from the eastern side we attacked, and also using the vertical envelopment. So
Yes.
it gave a sense of insecurity. Our part is hitting the minds of the people, of the enemy. This thing. So that is why they gave in. They did not know what is happening. That unpredictability has to be coming in to attack the mind of the enemy. If you were predictable, then there's a problem. So it was a
Yes.
brilliant case of OPAT in 1971. But when
And do
we
you agree? Sorry, please continue.
but when we say in 1947, it
Yes.
was just firefighting and not any OPAT. It was just tactical. This thing, no operational art was there, or strategy also, I would say, was missing. So a question may come: the OPAT in 1947. So I would plainly say that there was a total absence of it. It was just the firefighting in terms of the resources, in terms of the movement, or even the planning. It was only the firefighting, and they could not sustain like the offensive through the Uri and all. They could not sustain the thing. Uh,
No, possible reason could be, Gotra, possible reason could be that in 1947-48, our situational awareness was extremely poor. Whereas in 1979, especially on the Eastern Front, because of the support and of the local population which had gone against the Pakistan army, we were exactly aware of what is the deployment of the enemy and what are the avenues that are available to us. And that is why, if you want to practice a good operational art, which is generally practiced at the core level, our situational awareness should be of extremely high order, which was not the case in 1947.
exactly. Now, when we study Napoleon, he in his army had those concept of some telescope, tactical telescope, or what. In that, he had sent people across, and he was getting the feedback from his officers. Similarly, our Mukti Bahini and our officers in the Mukti Bahini were giving the inputs, and we were totally aware what is happening. Even the Pakistanis did not know what is happening.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that is where the operational art. So it is a very important thing to have an operational awareness and then transmission of those messages back to. Because if it is wrong inputs, then that's also a problem with the operational
Yes.
art.
I think we've had a wonderful discussion, Gotra, and we will continue. I'll request our audience to please put in their comments on this format, and there will be some freewheeling discussion. In fact, I normally notice that our audience is not going through the entire video. We make it very effective in the sense that we just include the essentials, and if you do not watch the video till end, you may miss out on something, and in the next video we may not repeat it, presuming that you have watched it in the previous one. So I will request everybody to please go through the entire video and do use the column of comments. It is also not only for us to improve, but also a source of encouragement for us. So with that, I think we should close today. Thank you very much, Gotra, for working so hard to bring this chapter into simple language for our audience. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you.